The Alpha King's voice echoed through the marble halls of the Moonstone Palace, cold and absolute. "Show me all candidates." His command was law, his word unbreakable. Yet in the shadows of the ancient throne room, where silver veins pulsed through obsidian walls like frozen lightning, a secret festered, one that would shatter kingdoms and rewrite the fate of every wolf-blooded soul in the 7 territories. For the candidate he truly wanted, the one whose scent haunted his dreams, and whose power could eclipse his own, was hidden behind layers of deception so intricate that even she didn't know what she was. And when the truth finally clawed its way to the surface, it would be written in blood, betrayal, and a love that defied the very laws of their paranormal world. The Silverpaw territory had always smelled of pine and protocol. Elara Silverpaw stood before the floor-length mirror in her chambers, her reflection a stranger draped in silk, the color of moonlight. The dress clung to her curves with practiced elegance, each pearl sewn into the bodice, representing a year of her bloodline service to the werewolf hierarchy. 23 pearls, 23 years of breathing air that tasted of duty and expectation. "You look perfect, my lady." Her handmaiden mirror adjusted the silver circlet that crowned Elara's dark auburn hair. "Lord Cassius will be pleased." Pleased. The word sat bitter on Elara's tongue. Lord Cassius Blackthorn, heir to the most powerful pack in the Eastern Territories, had chosen her not for love but for lineage. The Silverpaws were ancient, their bloodline pure, their wolves strong. She was a prize to be displayed, a womb to carry future alphas, a decorative addition to his already impressive collection of assets. "Has the delegation arrived?" Elara asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "An hour ago. The Blackthorn wolves travel with an entourage of 50. Mira's eyes gleamed with excitement. "They say Lord Cassius himself killed a rogue alpha last month with his bare hands. They say he's the strongest wolf in 3 generations. They say. Elara had heard the stories. Cassius Blackthorn was power incarnate, brutal, efficient, and utterly devoid of warmth. Their arranged mating had been negotiated by their parents when she was 16, a political alliance designed to unite 2 influential packs. She'd never been asked if she wanted it. Wolves of her station didn't get asked. The Silverpaw estate sprawled across the northern hills like a sleeping beast, all stone towers and ancient magic. Elara had grown up within these walls, learning the intricate dance of pack politics, memorizing genealogies, studying the old laws that governed their kind. She knew which fork to use at formal dinners, how to bow to visiting dignitaries, and exactly how much eye contact to maintain with a dominant wolf without challenging his authority. What she didn't know was who she was beneath all those carefully constructed layers. "My lady, your father requests your presence in the great hall." Mira's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Elara nodded, smoothing her dress one final time. The silk whispered against her skin, a sound like secrets being kept. She descended the spiral staircase, her fingers trailing along the cold stone walls that had witnessed centuries of Silverpaw history. Portraits of her ancestors lined the corridor, stern-faced wolves with eyes that seemed to follow her, judging, measuring, finding her somehow lacking. The great hall was a cathedral of paranormal grandeur. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadows, and massive chandeliers dripped with crystals that caught the firelight and scattered it like captured stars. The air thrummed with barely contained power. Dozens of dominant wolves gathered in one space, their combined energy making the atmosphere thick and electric. Her father, Alpha Marcus Silverpaw, stood at the center of it all, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight. He was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and commanding, but age had begun to soften his edges. Beside him stood her mother, Luna Catherine, elegant and cold as winter frost. And there, surrounded by his entourage like a dark sun with orbiting planets, was Cassius Blackthorn. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp angles and lethal grace. His black hair was pulled back from a face that could have been carved from marble, and his eyes were the color of amber, shot through with gold. When those eyes found her across the crowded hall, Elara felt the weight of his gaze like a physical touch. "Ah, there she is." Her father's voice boomed across the space. "Lord Cassius, may I present my daughter, Elara." She descended the final steps with practiced grace, her head held high despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. Every eye in the hall tracked her movement. She could feel their assessment, their judgment, their curiosity, This was her audition, her moment to prove she was worthy of the Blackthorn name. Cassius stepped forward, and the crowd parted for him like water around stone. He moved with the fluid confidence of a predator who had never known fear, never questioned his place at the top of the food chain. When he reached her, he extended his hand. "Lady Elara." His voice was deep, smooth, utterly controlled. "You're even more lovely than I remembered." She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses on his palm, the barely restrained strength in his grip. "Lord Cassius, welcome to Silverpaw territory." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Shall we speak privately? I believe we have much to discuss regarding our upcoming union." It wasn't a request. Elara glanced at her father, who nodded his approval, his expression pleased. Of course he was pleased. This match elevated their pack's status, secured their borders, guaranteed their bloodline's continuation. What more could a father want? Cassius led her through a side door into the moon garden, where silver flowers bloomed only under starlight, and the air smelled of magic and growing things. The moment they were alone, his demeanor shifted. The polite mask slipped, revealing something harder underneath. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," he said, releasing her hand. "This arrangement benefits both our packs. You'll bear my heirs, maintain my household, and represent the Blackthorn name with dignity. In return, you'll have wealth, status, and protection. It's a fair exchange." Elara's throat tightened. "And love?" He laughed. A short, sharp sound, devoid of humor. "Love is a human weakness. We're wolves. We mate for power, for bloodline, for territory. Surely your parents taught you that." They had. Gods, they had drilled it into her since childhood. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she barely acknowledged even to herself, she'd hoped for something more, something real. "I understand," she said quietly. "Good." He circled her slowly, assessing. "You're acceptable, pretty enough, good breeding, adequate education. You'll do. You'll do." As if she were a piece of furniture he was considering purchasing. "The ceremony will take place in 3 months, Cassius continued. "I expect you to relocate to Blackthorn Manor 2 weeks prior for acclimation. My mother will oversee your final preparations." "Of course." He stopped in front of her, tilting her chin up with one finger. His touch was cold. "Don't disappoint me, Elara. I don't tolerate disappointment well." Before she could respond, a commotion erupted from the great hall, raised voices, the sound of something crashing. Cassius's head snapped toward the noise, his body tensing into a predator's crouch. They rushed back inside to find chaos. A young woman stood in the center of the hall, her clothes torn and muddy, her blonde hair wild around her face. Blood streaked her arms, and her eyes were wide with terror. "Rogues!" she gasped. "Rogues attacked the western border. They're coming this way." Alpha Marcus moved immediately, barking orders. Wolves shifted into defensive positions, the air crackling with the energy of impending transformation. Cassius strode forward, his entire demeanor changing from bored aristocrat to lethal warrior in a heartbeat. "How many?" he demanded. "At least 30, maybe more." The messenger swayed on her feet. "They killed the border patrol. All of them." A cold dread settled in Elara's stomach. Rogue wolves were dangerous, outcasts who'd rejected pack law, who killed for sport and fed on chaos. An organized attack of this size was unprecedented. "Elara, go to your chambers," her father commanded. "Now." But even as he spoke, the windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and moonlight. Wolves poured through the openings, massive, snarling beasts with eyes that glowed red with bloodlust. The great hall erupted into violence. Elara stumbled backward as a rogue landed in front of her, its jaws dripping saliva, its growl vibrating through her bones. She'd never learned to fight. Ladies of her station didn't. She'd been taught to be decorative, diplomatic, demure. The rogue lunged, and something inside Elara woke up. Power exploded through her veins like liquid fire. Her vision sharpened, colors becoming almost painfully vivid. She could smell everything: fear, blood, the rogue's rancid breath, and underneath it all, something ancient and vast that pulsed in time with her racing heart. Her hand shot out instinctively, and silver light erupted from her palm. The rogue wolf flew backward as if struck by an invisible force, slamming into the stone wall with enough impact to crack the ancient masonry. It didn't get up. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Her father's face had gone white. Her mother's hand covered her mouth in horror. And Cassius stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Shock, yes, but also something that looked disturbingly like calculation. What? Elara stared at her own hands, which still glowed with faint silver light. What did I do? Her father moved toward her slowly, as if approaching a dangerous animal. Elara, daughter, you need to calm down. I don't understand. Her voice shook. What's happening to me? You're manifesting, her mother whispered, and there was something in her tone. Fear, but also resignation, as if she'd been dreading this moment for years. Oh gods, you're manifesting. The word hung in the air like a curse. Manifesting. The awakening of dormant power. The emergence of abilities that marked certain wolves as different, special, dangerous. Cassius's expression had hardened into something cold and assessing. You didn't tell me she was a latent Silverblood. We didn't know, Alpha Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. It's been generations since... Don't lie to me. Cassius's voice dropped to a lethal purr. Silverblood magic doesn't just appear. It's inherited. Which means someone in your precious pure bloodline has been keeping secrets. Elara's mind reeled. Silverblood. She'd heard the term in old stories, legends of wolves who could wield moon magic, who could command power beyond simple transformation. They were rare, coveted, and according to pack law they belonged to the Alpha King. All of them. The arrangement stands, her father said firmly. She's promised to you. The contracts are signed. The contracts are void if she's Silverblood. Cassius's eyes never left Elara. You know the law as well as I do, Marcus. She must be presented to the Alpha King. He decides her fate. No. The word escaped Elara's lips before she could stop it. I'm not property to be traded between alphas like... You are exactly that, Cassius cut her off. You're a wolf of breeding age with rare and valuable abilities. The Alpha King will want you. And what the Alpha King wants, he takes. The truth of his words settled over her like a shroud. She'd spent her entire life preparing to be Cassius's mate, his possession, his breeding stock. Now she would be shipped off to the Moonstone Palace to serve an even more powerful alpha, one she'd never met, whose reputation for ruthlessness was legendary throughout all 7 territories. From one gilded cage to another, with bars made of magic instead of expectation. I won't go, she said, but even she could hear the futility in her voice. Her father's expression was anguished. You don't have a choice, daughter. None of us do. The Alpha King's law is absolute. Outside, the moon rose full and bright, its silver light streaming through the broken windows, and somewhere far to the north, in a palace built of moonstone and ambition, an Alpha King sat on his throne and waited for news of a candidate he'd been searching for his entire life. A candidate whose scent he'd never forgotten, whose power called to his own like a missing piece of his soul. A candidate who had just revealed herself to the world in a burst of silver light and desperate magic. The hunt had begun. The Moonstone Palace rose from the northern mountains like a crown of ice and arrogance. Elara had been traveling for 3 days, confined to a gilded carriage that smelled of leather and her own fear. The Blackthorn escort had delivered her to the Alpha King's guards at the territorial border, silent, massive wolves who watched her with eyes that revealed nothing. She was cargo now, a package being delivered to its rightful owner. The palace itself defied comprehension. Towers of white stone veined with silver reached toward the sky, and everywhere she looked, magic pulsed visibly through the architecture like a living heartbeat. The air tasted different here, thinner, sharper, saturated with power so concentrated it made her skin prickle. Lady Silverpaw. A woman appeared at the carriage door, her silver hair braided in an intricate pattern that marked her as high-ranking palace staff. I am Lydia, mistress of candidates. You will come with me. Candidates. The word made Elara's stomach clench. She wasn't the only one, then. Of course not. An Alpha King would have his pick of eligible females from across all territories. Lydia led her through corridors that seemed to shift and breathe, past windows that looked out onto impossible gardens, where flowers bloomed in colors that shouldn't exist. Other young women moved through the halls in small clusters, their whispers falling silent as Elara passed. She caught fragments of conversation, speculation about the selection ceremony, gossip about the Alpha King's preferences, bitter complaints about rivals. You'll share quarters with the other Silverblood candidates, Lydia said, her tone clipped and efficient. There are currently 7 of you. The ceremony begins at moonrise tonight. Tonight? Elara's voice cracked. But I just arrived. I haven't... The Alpha King doesn't wait for anyone's convenience. Lydia's expression softened slightly. You'll be provided with appropriate attire. Try not to embarrass yourself. The candidate's wing was a study in controlled luxury. Elara's assigned chamber was beautiful, all silk and silver with a view of the mountain peaks, but the door locked from the outside. Another cage, just prettier than the last. A dress had been laid out on the bed. Not silk this time, but something that shimmered like liquid moonlight, cut to reveal and conceal in equal measure. A collar of silver filigree accompanied it, delicate as lace, but unmistakably a symbol of her status here. She was being claimed, marked, prepared for presentation. When the bells chimed for assembly, Elara joined the stream of candidates flowing toward the grand ceremonial hall. The other Silverblood women were stunning, each one carefully selected for beauty, bloodline, and power. She recognized a few faces from interpack gatherings: Seraphina Nightshade, whose family controlled the southern ports; Vivian Frost, daughter of the Western Territory's most influential alpha; and there, walking with practiced grace, was Celeste Ravenclaw, whose silver eyes marked her as pure Silverblood, untainted by common wolf genetics. Celeste caught Elara staring and smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. "Silverpaw, isn't it? I heard about your little incident. How quaint that your power only manifested when you were frightened. Mine has been active since I was 12. How fortunate for you," Elara replied evenly, refusing to be baited. The Alpha King values strength, not late bloomers who stumble into their abilities by accident. Celeste's voice carried, drawing the attention of nearby candidates. But I suppose they had to fill the quota somehow. Heat crept up Elara's neck. But before she could respond, massive doors swung open, revealing the grand ceremonial hall. It was a cathedral of paranormal grandeur that made her family's great hall look like a cottage. The ceiling disappeared into darkness, punctuated by floating orbs of silver light. Hundreds of wolves filled the space, alphas from every territory, council members, nobles, and warriors. The combined power in the room was suffocating, a pressure that made breathing difficult. And at the center of it all, elevated on a dais of black stone, sat the Alpha King. Elara's breath caught. He was nothing like she'd imagined. Young, perhaps 30, with dark hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes the color of molten gold. Power radiated from him in visible waves, distorting the air around his throne like heat shimmer. He wore black leather and silver armor, and a crown of moonstone rested on his brow, pulsing with its own inner light. But it was his scent that struck her like a physical blow, pine and winter storms and something wild and ancient that called to the newly awakened power in her blood. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred restlessly inside her chest. "Candidates, approach." His voice rolled through the hall like thunder, and every woman moved forward as if pulled by invisible strings. They formed a line before the dais, 7 Silverblood females on display like prizes at a market. Elara's hands trembled, so she clasped them behind her back where no one could see. The Alpha King rose from his throne with fluid grace and descended the steps. He moved down the line slowly, assessing each candidate with an intensity that felt invasive. When he paused before Seraphina, she tilted her head in submission, exposing her throat. He inhaled deeply, then moved on without comment. Vivian received similar treatment. Then Celeste, who met his gaze boldly before lowering her eyes, a calculated display of spirit tempered by respect. Then he stood before Elara. Up close, he was overwhelming, taller than any wolf she'd ever met, radiating power that made her newly manifested abilities feel like a candle flame before a wildfire. His golden eyes swept over her face, and something flickered in their depths. Recognition. Impossible. They'd never met. He leaned in, his breath warm against her neck as he inhaled her scent. Elara's heart hammered so loudly she was certain everyone in the hall could hear it. His proximity made her skin tingle, made that strange power in her blood surge and reach toward him like a plant seeking sunlight. "Your name," he commanded softly. "Elara Silverpaw, Your Majesty." The late bloomer. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. "How interesting." He moved on, finishing his inspection of the line. When he returned to the dais, he turned to face them all, his expression unreadable. "The Silverblood lineage is sacred," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "Those who bear this gift are treasures of our kind, and it is my duty as Alpha King to ensure their power is properly Utilized. Elara didn't like the way he said that word. However, he continued, not all Silverbloods are created equal. Some manifest early, their power refined through years of training and discipline. His gaze swept over Celeste, who straightened with pride. Others stumble into their abilities through fear and accident, their power raw and uncontrolled. His eyes locked on Elara, and the hall fell silent. Lady Elara Silverpaw manifested her abilities only days ago, during a rogue attack. She has no training, no control, no understanding of what she is. He paused, letting his words sink in. Tell me, Lady Elara, can you summon your power now? On command. Every eye in the hall turned to her. Elara's mouth went dry. She'd tried in the privacy of her chamber to recreate that burst of silver light. Nothing had happened. The power that had exploded from her during the attack remained frustratingly dormant. She swallowed hard. I'm still learning, Your Majesty. Show me. It was a command, not a request. Elara closed her eyes, reaching for that place inside herself where the power had awakened. She visualized the silver light, remembered the sensation of it flowing through her veins. Nothing, just emptiness, and the growing weight of hundreds of watching eyes. I can't, she whispered. Speak up, the Alpha King said coldly. Let everyone hear. I can't. The words burst from her, sharp with humiliation. I don't know how. Laughter rippled through the crowd, not kind laughter, but the cruel amusement of predators watching prey stumble. Celeste's smile was triumphant. Even some of the other candidates looked relieved, grateful that someone else had been singled out for humiliation. Untrained, uncontrolled, useless, the Alpha King's voice was merciless. The Silverblood gift is wasted on those too weak to wield it. Elara's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She'd spent her entire life being told she wasn't enough, not dominant enough, not powerful enough, not special enough. And now, in front of the most powerful wolves in all 7 territories, she was being publicly declared worthless. However, the Alpha King continued, I am not without mercy. Lady Elara will remain at the palace as a servant to the true Silverblood candidates. Perhaps in serving her betters, she'll learn what it means to be worthy of the gift she's been given. The hall erupted in murmurs. A Silverpaw reduced to a servant? It was unheard of, a humiliation that would echo through every territory. Your Majesty, Elara forced the words past the lump in her throat. My family, your family should have trained you properly. His golden eyes were pitiless. Be grateful I'm allowing you to stay at all. Dismissed. Guards appeared at her elbows, already moving to escort her away. As they led her from the hall, Elara caught one final glimpse of the Alpha King. He'd already turned away, his attention on Celeste, who was demonstrating her power, silver light dancing between her fingers like tamed lightning. The doors closed behind her, with a sound like a tomb sealing. In the corridor, away from the crowd, Elara finally let the tears fall. The guards released her, pointing toward a different wing of the palace. The servants' quarters, she realized with fresh horror. Everything she'd been, everything she'd prepared for, stripped away in a matter of minutes. But as she walked those cold stone corridors alone, something else stirred beneath the humiliation. Anger, hot and bright and utterly foreign to someone who'd been taught her entire life to be compliant. The Alpha King had called her weak, useless, unworthy. She would prove him wrong. In the grand ceremonial hall, the Alpha King watched the remaining candidates with apparent interest, his expression revealing nothing. But his beta, Marcus Ironwood, who'd served him for 15 years, noticed the tension in his sovereign's shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the throne's armrest. That was cruel even for you, Marcus murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear. The Alpha King's jaw tightened. It was necessary. Was it? Or did you just hide the one candidate you actually want where no one else will think to look? Golden eyes flashed dangerously. Careful, old friend. But Marcus had known him too long to be intimidated. Her scent called to you. I saw your reaction. Which is precisely why she can't be chosen publicly. The Alpha King's voice dropped to barely a whisper. There are forces at work here you don't understand. Enemies who would use her against me. Against us all. So you humiliate her instead. I protect her. The words came out harsh, almost pained, even if she'll hate me for it. In the servants' wing, Elara Silverpaw lay on a narrow bed in a tiny room, her silver dress crumpled on the floor. She stared at her hands, willing the power to manifest, to prove she was more than the Alpha King's cruel assessment, and deep inside, where that ancient magic slept, Something began to stir. The real awakening was only beginning. The servant's wing smelled of lye soap and resignation. Elara woke to the sound of bells chiming the dawn hour, her body aching from the thin mattress, and her pride still raw from the previous night's humiliation. The tiny room assigned to her was a stark contrast to the luxury she'd known. Bare stone walls, a single window that looked out onto the kitchen gardens, and a wooden chest for her belongings. She owned nothing now except the clothes on her back and the shame that clung to her like a second skin. A sharp knock preceded the door opening. An older woman with steel-grey hair and a face carved from years of service stepped inside. "Up. You're assigned to the library today. Professor Thorne requested additional help cataloguing the restricted archives." "Professor Thorne?" Elara asked, pulling herself from bed. "The King's advisor on ancient magic and Silverblood history. He's particular." The woman's expression softened slightly. "But fair. More than most here will be to you, given your circumstances. I'm Margot, head of household staff. You'll report to me each morning." The palace library was a labyrinth of knowledge that spanned 3 floors and countless chambers. Elara was directed to the deepest level, where the air tasted of old parchment and preserved magic. Dust motes danced in shafts of light that filtered through high windows, and the silence was so complete she could hear her own heartbeat. "Ah, the fallen Silverpaw." A voice emerged from between towering shelves. "Right on time." Professor Thorne was not what she expected. Ancient, perhaps the oldest wolf she'd ever encountered, he moved with a sprightness that belied his age. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "Your Majesty's advisor," Elara said, bowing her head respectfully. "Please, such formality is exhausting." He waved a dismissive hand. "You may call me Thorne. Everyone does, whether I permit it or not. Come, child. We have much work to do." He led her through narrow aisles to a chamber filled with texts so old the leather bindings had turned to powder in places. "These are records of the Silverblood lineages, dating back 8 centuries. They need to be catalogued, preserved, and in some cases translated from the old tongue. Can you read ancient script?" "Some," Elara admitted. "My mother insisted I learn, though I never understood why." "Didn't you?" Thorne's pale eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. How curious that a mother would ensure her daughter could read texts about Silverblood magic, only for that daughter to manifest said magic years later, almost as if she knew something. The implication hung in the air between them. "Are you suggesting my mother knew I would manifest?" "I'm suggesting nothing. I'm an old wolf who catalogues books." But his smile suggested otherwise. "Now start with this section. Handle them gently. Some of these texts are older than the 7 territories themselves." The work was painstaking but oddly soothing. Elara lost herself in the rhythm of it, carefully opening ancient volumes, recording their contents, preserving knowledge that had survived centuries. The texts spoke of Silverbloods, who could command moonlight, who served as bridges between the wolf world and something older, something that predated pack law and territorial boundaries. "You're reading them," Thorne observed after several hours. "Not just cataloguing. Reading." Elara looked up, caught. "I'm sorry, don't apologize for curiosity. It's the only trait worth cultivating." He settled into a chair across from her, his ancient joints creaking. "What have you learned? That Silverblood magic isn't just power. It's connection. To the moon, to the earth, to the magic that existed before wolves learned to shift." She touched the page before her reverently. "This text describes a Silverblood who could hear the thoughts of every wolf in her territory, another who could heal wounds that should have been fatal. They weren't just strong, they were essential. And yet the Alpha King called you useless." Thorne's voice was gentle, but his words cut deep. "He was right. I can't control it. I can't even summon it." The admission tasted like ash. "Can't you? Or have you simply been trying in the wrong way?" Thorne leaned forward. "Tell me, when your power manifested during the rogue attack, what were you feeling? Terror, desperation, the need to survive. Emotion, then. Not will, not command, but pure, raw emotion." He tapped the book before her. "Silverblood magic isn't like alpha dominance or pack bonds. It doesn't respond to force. It responds to truth, to the authentic self beneath all the layers of training and expectation. You've spent your entire life being told who to be. Perhaps your magic is waiting for you to discover who you are." The words resonated in a place deep inside her chest, where that dormant power slept. How do I do that? By asking yourself what you want. Not what your parents wanted, not what Cassius Blackthorn wanted, not what the Alpha King expects. What do you, Elara Silverpaw, want? No one had ever asked her that before. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed through the library. A figure emerged from the shadows between shelves, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore the simple leather of a palace guard, but something in the way he moved suggested he was far more than that. "Professor, the king requests your presence in the council chamber." His voice was deep, resonant, and when his gaze fell on Elara, she felt a jolt of recognition, though she'd never seen him before. "Ah, Marcus. Always interrupting at the most inopportune moments." Thorn rose with a sigh. "Lady Elara, this is Marcus Ironwood, beta to the Alpha King and general nuisance. Marcus, Lady Elara Silverpaw, who is far more interesting than her recent humiliation would suggest." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. "My lady, I'm not a lady anymore," Elara said quietly. "Just a servant." "Are you?" He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Strange. You don't smell like a servant." "And what do servants smell like?" The words came out sharper than intended. A smile ghosted across his lips. "Resignation? Acceptance. You smell like banked fire and barely contained fury. Much more interesting." Thorn chuckled. "I'll leave you two to your philosophical discussion of scent profiles. Elara, continue the cataloguing, and think about my question." He departed with surprising speed for someone his age, leaving her alone with the beta. Marcus moved closer, his presence filling the small space between the shelves. "The king was harsh with you last night. The king was honest." Elara forced herself to meet his gaze. "I am untrained. I can't control my power. Everything he said was true. Truth and cruelty aren't mutually exclusive." Marcus picked up one of the ancient texts, handling it with surprising gentleness. "But perhaps there was purpose in his cruelty. What purpose could there be in humiliating me in front of every alpha in the 7 territories? Making you invisible." He set the book down carefully. "The Alpha King has enemies, Lady Elara. Wolves who would use any perceived weakness against him. A Silverblood mate would be a target, a vulnerability to exploit, but a failed candidate relegated to servant status. No one looks twice at servants." The implication made her breath catch. "You're saying he protected me?" "I'm saying nothing. I'm merely a guard who reads too many books." But his eyes told a different story. "However, if one were to hypothetically protect someone while appearing to reject them, the library would be an excellent place to hide them, particularly under the watchful eye of the kingdom's foremost expert on Silverblood magic." Before Elara could respond, a commotion erupted from somewhere above. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted, the philosophical scholar disappearing behind the trained warrior. "Stay here," he commanded, already moving toward the stairs. But Elara had spent too many years following orders, being compliant, staying where she was told. Something in her, that same something that had awakened during the rogue attack, rebelled. She followed. The main level of the library had transformed into chaos. Several of the Silverblood candidates clustered near the entrance, their voices shrill with excitement and malice. At the center of the group stood Celeste Ravenclaw, her silver eyes gleaming with triumph. "Found her skulking in the restricted archives," Celeste was saying to a palace official, clearly trying to steal knowledge above her station. "I demand she be punished appropriately." Elara's stomach dropped as she realized they were talking about her. "I wasn't skulking," she said, stepping forward. "I was assigned to catalog." "Assigned?" Celeste laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You're a servant. Servants don't get assigned to restricted archives. They scrub floors and empty chamber pots." "Professor Thorn requested her assistance," Marcus said coldly, positioning himself between Elara and the candidates. "Are you questioning the king's advisor's judgment?" Celeste's expression soured, but she recovered quickly. "Of course not. I simply find it curious that a disgraced Silverpaw is given access to texts about Silverblood magic, while those of us actually chosen by the king are kept in the dark. Perhaps the king values competence over pedigree," Elara said before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Celeste's face flushed with rage, and silver light began to dance around her fingers, a clear threat. "You dare—" Enough! The single word cut through the tension like a blade. The Alpha King stood in the library entrance, his presence immediately dominating the space. Every wolf in the room instinctively lowered their gaze, including Elara, but she could feel his attention on her, like a physical weight. "Lady Celeste, return to your quarters. This display is beneath you." His voice was cold, controlled, revealing nothing. "But, Your Majesty, she—" Now. Celeste fled, the other candidates scattering like leaves before a storm. Within moments, only Elara, Marcus, and the Alpha King remained. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Finally, the king spoke. "You were told to stay in the archives. I heard a commotion. I thought—" "You thought wrong." He moved closer, and Elara forced herself not to retreat. "You are here on my sufferance, Elara Silverpaw. One more incident like this, and I'll send you back to your family in disgrace. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty." But as he turned to leave, Elara caught something in his scent. Beneath the dominance and cold authority, there was something else. Something that smelled like pine forests and winter storms, and a loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. "Your Majesty," she called before she could stop herself, "why am I really here?" He paused, his back to her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, without turning, "Because you're exactly where you need to be, even if you don't understand why yet." And then he was gone, leaving Elara with more questions than answers, and the growing certainty that nothing about her situation was what it seemed. 3 weeks in the library had transformed Elara in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her hands bore calluses from handling ancient texts. Her mind buzzed with knowledge of Silverblood lineages and forgotten magic. And something inside her, that dormant power, had begun to stir with increasing frequency. Professor Thorn was a patient teacher, never pushing, always guiding, asking questions that made her examine herself in ways she'd never dared before. "What do you want, Elara?" He'd asked that question every day in different forms until it became a meditation. She still didn't have a complete answer, but she was beginning to understand that not knowing was itself a kind of freedom. "There's a gathering tonight," Thorn mentioned casually one afternoon as they worked. "The Lunar Ascension Ball. Every alpha of significance will attend, along with the Silverblood candidates. The king uses it to display his court's strength and unity." "I'm a servant," Elara said, carefully transcribing a passage about moon-binding rituals. "I won't be invited." "Won't you?" Thorn's pale eyes gleamed with mischief. "Check your quarters when you return this evening. I believe you'll find a surprise." The dress waiting in her room was nothing like the servant's simple garb she'd grown accustomed to. It was midnight blue silk that shimmered like starlight, cut to emphasize her figure while maintaining an air of elegant mystery. A note accompanied it, written in Thorn's spidery script. "Every wolf deserves one night to remember who they are beneath what others have made them. Wear this. Attend. Observe. Learn." Elara's hands trembled as she touched the fabric. This was dangerous, appearing at a royal ball after being publicly humiliated, drawing attention she'd been carefully avoiding. But something in her, that growing spark of defiance, whispered, yes. The grand ballroom was a spectacle of paranormal grandeur that made even the ceremonial hall pale in comparison. Crystal chandeliers the size of carriages hung from vaulted ceilings, casting prismatic light across marble floors, inlaid with silver. Hundreds of wolves in their finest attire moved through the space like a living tapestry. Alphas in formal leather and silk, their mates dripping with jewels, warriors bearing ceremonial weapons, and at the center of it all, the Silverblood candidates. Celeste Ravenclaw held court like a queen already crowned, her silver dress reflecting light with every movement. The other candidates orbited her, seeking favor, forming alliances. They were beautiful, powerful, and utterly confident in their place here. Elara entered through a side entrance, hoping to remain unnoticed. For several minutes, she succeeded, keeping to the shadows, observing the intricate dance of pack politics and power plays. Then Marcus Ironwood appeared at her elbow, 2 crystal glasses in hand. "You came. I wasn't certain you would. Professor Thorn can be very persuasive." She accepted the glass, some kind of sparkling wine that tasted of moonlight and wild berries. He has a gift for seeing potential others miss. Marcus's storm-gray eyes studied her with that same unsettling intensity. "You look different. More yourself." "I feel different." It was true. 3 weeks of intellectual challenge, of being valued for her mind rather than her bloodline, had begun to shift something fundamental inside her. Is this wise, though? My being here? Wisdom is overrated. A smile tugged at his lips. Besides, you have as much right to be here as any of them. More, perhaps. Before she could ask what he meant, a ripple of attention swept through the ballroom. The Alpha King had entered, and every eye turned toward him like flowers seeking the sun. He wore black leather and silver, his moonstone crown catching the light, his presence commanding absolute attention. His golden eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on the cluster of Silverblood candidates before moving on. When his gaze found Elara, something flickered in those depths. Surprise, perhaps, or something more complex. Their eyes held for a heartbeat, 2, 3. Then he looked away, his expression revealing nothing. He sees you, Marcus murmured. He always sees you. What does that mean? But Marcus had already melted into the crowd, leaving her alone with her racing heart and growing confusion. The evening progressed with formal dances and political maneuvering. Elara remained at the periphery, content to observe, until a commotion drew everyone's attention to the center of the ballroom. "Your Majesty," Celeste's voice rang out, clear and confident. "If it pleases you, I would demonstrate the progress I've made in controlling my Silverblood abilities. Perhaps it might inspire others to apply themselves more diligently." The barb was clearly aimed at Elara, though Celeste didn't look her way. The Alpha King inclined his head, granting permission. Celeste raised her hands, and silver light erupted from her palms, not wild or uncontrolled, but shaped and directed with precision. She wove the light into intricate patterns, creating images in the air, a wolf running, a moon rising, a crown forming and dissolving. The crowd gasped and applauded, clearly impressed. "Magnificent, Lady Celeste," the king said, his tone neutral. "Your control is admirable." Celeste's smile was triumphant. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I live to serve the crown and demonstrate the true potential of Silverblood magic." Her silver eyes finally found Elara across the room. "Unlike some who squander their gifts through incompetence." The crowd's attention shifted, following Celeste's gaze. Whispers erupted as wolves recognized the disgraced Silverpaw servant standing among her betters. Elara's face burned, but she refused to look away, refused to show weakness. "Lady Elara," the Alpha King's voice cut through the murmurs, "perhaps you'd care to demonstrate your own progress. 3 weeks under Professor Thorn's tutelage must have yielded some results." It was a trap, a test, a public challenge she couldn't refuse without confirming every cruel assessment made of her. Elara's throat tightened as she stepped forward, the crowd parting before her like water. She stood in the center of the ballroom, every eye upon her, and reached for that place inside where her power slept. "What do you want?" Thorn's question echoed in her mind. Not what others wanted from her, what she wanted. "I want to be seen, not as a failure or a servant or a disappointment, as myself." The power stirred, responding not to force but to truth. Silver light began to glow beneath her skin, visible through her veins like liquid moonlight. It didn't explode outward as it had during the rogue attack. Instead, it built slowly, steadily, responding to her will for the first time. Elara raised her hands, and the light flowed from her palms, not in controlled patterns like Celeste's display, but in something wilder, more organic. The silver light spread across the ballroom floor like water, pooling and swirling, and where it touched, flowers began to bloom. Real flowers, not illusions, night-blooming jasmine and silver roses, their scent filling the air with magic and moonlight. The crowd gasped, but Elara barely heard them. She was lost in the sensation of her power finally answering her call, of magic flowing through her like a river finding its course. The flowers spread throughout the ballroom, climbing pillars, winding through chandeliers, transforming the space into an enchanted garden. When the light finally faded, Elara swayed on her feet, exhausted but exhilarated. The ballroom had fallen silent, every wolf staring at the impossible garden she'd created. "Interesting," the Alpha King said softly, and something in his voice made her look up. His golden eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Very interesting indeed." Celeste's face had gone pale with fury. "Parlor tricks. Creating illusions is—" "They're not illusions." Professor Thorn's voice carried from the edge of the crowd. He'd appeared without anyone noticing, his ancient face creased with satisfaction. "Touch them, smell them. Lady Elara hasn't created images of flowers. She's manifested actual living plants through pure Silverblood magic, a feat I haven't witnessed in over a century. The implications rippled through the crowd. Creating illusions was impressive. Creating life was something else entirely, a demonstration of power that marked Elara as far more than the failed candidate she'd been labeled. How? Celeste demanded, her composure cracking. She couldn't even summon a spark 3 weeks ago. Because she stopped trying to be what others expected and started discovering what she actually is, Thorn replied. A lesson some would do well to learn. The Alpha King descended from his dais, moving through the crowd with predatory grace. He stopped before Elara, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell that intoxicating scent of pine and winter storms. "You've been hiding your progress," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I've been learning who I am," she replied, meeting his gaze despite every instinct screaming at her to submit. "As you suggested I should." Something flashed in his golden eyes. Approval, desire, something that made her pulse race. "Dance with me." It wasn't a request. He extended his hand, and the entire ballroom held its breath. To dance with the Alpha King was to be singled out, elevated, claimed in a way that transcended words. Elara placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, power arced between them, his dominance meeting her newly awakened magic, creating a circuit that made the air around them shimmer. He pulled her into the traditional waltz position, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers, and began to move. They danced through the garden she'd created, silver flowers blooming in their wake. The crowd watched, transfixed, as the Alpha King and the disgraced servant moved together with a synchronicity that spoke of something deeper than mere attraction. "You're playing a dangerous game," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. "You started it," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "Humiliating me publicly, hiding me in the library, sending me this dress. What game are you playing, Your Majesty?" His hand tightened at her waist. "One you don't yet understand. One designed to keep you alive. From what? From those who would use you as a weapon against me. From those who would kill you to prevent what you might become." His golden eyes burned into hers. "From myself." The music swelled and he spun her, the movement bringing them impossibly closer. "You feel it too," he said, and it wasn't a question. "This connection between us. Your magic recognizes mine. Your wolf calls to mine." She did feel it, a pull so strong it terrified her, a sense of rightness that defied logic. "I don't understand. Neither do I. But I know it's dangerous. For both of us." The music ended, and he released her, stepping back with visible effort. "Return to the library tomorrow. Continue your studies. And Elara?" His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "Stay away from me. For your own sake." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in a garden of her own creation, her heart pounding and her mind reeling. Celeste appeared at her side, silver eyes blazing with hatred. "You think you've won something tonight? You think one impressive display changes anything? You're still a servant, still beneath me, still more powerful than you'll ever be," Marcus interrupted smoothly, offering Elara his arm. "Come, my lady. I believe you've made your point for the evening." As he led her from the ballroom, Elara glanced back once. The Alpha King stood on his dais, surrounded by advisors and candidates, but his eyes were on her, always on her. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't over. It was only beginning. The palace transformed overnight, from wonder to war zone. Elara woke to shouting in the corridors, the acrid smell of smoke, and the unmistakable scent of blood. She threw on her clothes and rushed from her chamber to find chaos, guards running with weapons drawn, servants huddling in corners, and everywhere the electric tension of imminent violence. "What's happening?" she demanded, catching Margot's arm as the older woman hurried past. "Attack! Rebels from the Shadow Territories breached the Eastern Wall an hour ago." Margot's face was pale. "They're demanding the king surrender the Silverblood candidates, all of them." Ice flooded Elara's veins. "Why?" "Because Silverblood magic can be stolen if you know the right rituals, and apparently someone taught these rebels exactly how." Margot gripped her shoulders. "Stay in your room, lock the door, don't come out for anyone except—" An explosion rocked the palace, sending them both stumbling. Screams erupted from somewhere above, followed by the sound of shattering glass and inhuman howls. "Too late," Margot whispered. "They're inside." Elara's newly awakened instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, to survive. But another part, the part that had bloomed in the library, that had created life from pure magic, refused to cower. "Where are the candidates?" The king ordered them to the throne room. It's the most defensible position. Margot's eyes widened as she realized Elara's intention. "No, you're not one of them anymore. You don't have to—" "They're still my people. Silverblood or not, I won't hide while others fight." Elara was already moving, following the sounds of battle toward the palace's heart. The corridors were a nightmare of smoke and shadows. She passed wounded guards, shattered walls, and twice had to press herself into alcoves as rebel wolves thundered past, their eyes glowing red with bloodlust and stolen magic. The throne room doors had been blown off their hinges. Inside, the Alpha King stood at the center of a defensive formation, his elite guard surrounding the 7 Silverblood candidates. His armor was scorched, his face streaked with blood, but his golden eyes blazed with fury and power. Facing him were at least 30 rebel wolves, their leader a massive brute with scars covering half his face and a collar of bones around his neck. Each bone taken from a victim, Elara realized with horror. "Surrender, the Silverbloods, and we'll leave peacefully," the scarred leader growled. "Resist and we'll take them over your corpse. You're welcome to try." The Alpha King's voice was death itself. "But I promise you won't leave this room alive." The rebel leader laughed. "Brave words. But you're outnumbered and we have something you don't." He raised his hand and dark magic, wrong, twisted, stolen, coiled around his fingers. Silverblood power, ripped from those too weak to protect it. "We've killed 6 of your precious gifted wolves already. What's 7 more? Behind the king, Celeste whimpered. The other candidates pressed closer together, their earlier confidence shattered by genuine terror. These weren't political rivals or social climbers anymore. They were prey-facing predators who wanted to literally steal their souls. Elara stepped through the broken doorway. Every eye turned to her. The Alpha King's expression shifted from fury to something that looked like anguish. "No, Elara, run. I'm done running." Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. "And I'm done hiding." The rebel leader's scarred face split into a grin. "Another lamb for the slaughter, how convenient. You want Silverblood magic?" Elara moved forward, her hands beginning to glow with silver light. "Come take it." Power erupted from her, not the gentle, controlled display from the ball, but something wild and primal. The silver light exploded outward, and where it touched the rebels, vines burst from the stone floor, wrapping around legs and arms, pulling them down. Thorns sprouted, sharp as daggers, drawing blood and howls of pain. But it wasn't enough. There were too many, and her power was too new, too untrained. A rebel broke through her defenses, lunging for her throat. Elara raised her hands instinctively. The Alpha King was there, moving with impossible speed. He caught the rebel mid-leap, his claws extending, and tore the wolf's throat out with brutal efficiency. Blood sprayed across the marble floor as the body fell. "Guard the candidates!" he roared to his warriors. Then to Elara, his voice dropping to something almost tender. "Fight with me. Not alone. With me." She understood immediately. Their powers had resonated during the dance, had created something stronger together than apart. She reached for that connection, letting her silver magic flow toward his golden dominance, and when they touched, the throne room exploded with light. Their combined power was devastating. Elara's life magic merged with the king's raw dominance, creating something entirely new. Where she summoned vines, he gave them teeth. Where he struck with claws, she healed his wounds before they could slow him. They moved together like a single organism, anticipating each other's actions, covering weaknesses, amplifying strengths. The rebels fell back, their confidence crumbling. The scarred leader snarled in fury, raising his hands to summon the stolen Silverblood magic. Dark energy coalesced, twisted and wrong, aimed directly at Elara's heart. The Alpha King threw himself in front of her. The dark magic struck him square in the chest, and he went down hard, his body convulsing. Elara screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. His skin had gone grey, his breathing shallow, and she could feel the stolen magic eating away at his life force like acid. "No, no, no." Her hands glowed silver as she pressed them to his chest, pouring her power into him, trying to counteract the poison. But the dark magic was too strong, too corrupted. "Foolish girl," the rebel leader laughed. "That magic was designed to kill Alpha Kings. Nothing can—" Professor Thorn's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Nothing except a true Silverblood mate bond." The ancient wolf stood in the doorway, Marcus at his side, both of them bloodied but alive. Thorn's pale eyes fixed on Elara with absolute certainty. "You know what you have to do, child. You've always known." Elara did know. The texts she'd read, the knowledge she'd absorbed. Silverblood magic was strongest when bonded to a mate, when two souls merged into something greater than either alone. But mate bonds were sacred, permanent, irrevocable. "Do it," the Alpha King gasped, his golden eyes finding hers. "Please, Elara, trust me." She didn't hesitate. Leaning down, she pressed her lips to his, and as she did, she opened herself completely. Every wall, every defense, every carefully constructed barrier. Her magic poured into him, and his flowed into her, and where they met, something clicked into place with the inevitability of destiny. The mate bond snapped into existence like a supernova. Power exploded outward from them in a shockwave that sent rebels flying. The dark magic poisoning the king's system burned away like mist before the sun, consumed by the pure, clean fire of their connection. Elara felt him in her mind, her heart, her soul, felt his strength, his loneliness, his desperate need to protect her, even at the cost of his own life. And she felt something else, the truth he'd been hiding. He'd known. From the moment she'd arrived at the palace, he'd recognized her scent, had felt the pull of a potential mate bond. Everything, the public humiliation, the library assignment, the careful distance, had been designed to protect her from enemies who would kill any wolf the Alpha King showed favor to. "You idiot," she whispered against his lips. "You beautiful, self-sacrificing idiot." He smiled, color returning to his face. "Guilty as charged." Together they rose. The mate bond thrummed between them, visible as threads of silver and gold light that connected their hearts. The remaining rebels took one look at them, at the Alpha King and his newly bonded Silverblood mate, radiating combined power that made the air itself shimmer, and fled. The scarred leader was not so wise. He charged with a roar of fury, dark magic swirling around him. Elara and the king moved as one, their powers merging seamlessly. Silver vines erupted from the floor, wrapping around the rebels' legs. Golden claws extended, tearing through corrupted magic like paper. And when Elara's hand touched the rebel's chest, her power burned away the stolen Silverblood magic, leaving him powerless and broken. "Mercy," he gasped. "You showed none to those you killed." The Alpha King's voice was merciless. "You'll receive none in return." Marcus and the royal guard dragged the surviving rebels away. The Silverblood candidates emerged from their protective formation, staring at Elara with expressions ranging from awe to bitter jealousy. Celeste's face was a mask of barely contained rage. "You planned this," she spat. "All of it. The humiliation, the servant act. It was all a lie to hide what she really was." "It was all real," the king replied calmly. "The humiliation, the rejection, the pain. All real, all necessary, and all designed to keep her alive long enough to come into her full power." His golden eyes swept over the assembled candidates. "You were never in consideration. None of you were. From the moment Elara Silverpaw entered my territory, she was mine. I simply had to keep her alive long enough for her to realize it." Thorn chuckled from the doorway. "And people say I'm the manipulative one." The king turned to Elara, and despite the blood and chaos surrounding them, his expression softened. "I know this isn't how you imagined choosing a mate. I know I've hurt you, manipulated you, put you through hell. If you want to break the bond, don't be absurd." Elara placed her hand over his heart, feeling it beat in rhythm with her own. "You're stuck with me now, though we're going to have a very long conversation about your communication skills. I look forward to it." He pulled her close, and the mate bond sang between them, a connection that transcended words or logic. "My queen." The title hung in the air, transforming everything. Elara Silverpaw, the disgraced servant, the failed candidate, was now the Alpha King's mate, his equal, his partner, his queen. "The council won't like this," Marcus observed. "A newly manifested Silverblood with no political training, no established alliances." "The council will adapt," the king said flatly, "or they'll be replaced." Elara looked around the destroyed throne room, at the candidates who'd scorned her, at the guards who'd watched her humiliation, at the palace that had been her prison and her salvation. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a pawn in someone else's game. Now she was a queen in her own right. "What happens now?" she asked. The king smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Now? Now we rebuild. Together. 6 months had transformed the Moonstone Palace from a place of secrets into something resembling a home. Elara stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, watching the sun rise over the 7 territories. The view still took her breath away. Mountains crowned with snow, forests that stretched to the horizon, and below, the palace gardens where silver flowers bloomed year-round, a gift from her magic that had become her signature. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she leaned back into the Alpha King's embrace. Kieran. She could call him by his name now, in private moments like this, though to the rest of the world, he remained the Alpha King, and she his queen. "You're up early," he murmured against her neck, his breath warm on her skin. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." She turned in his arms, studying the face she'd come to know as well as her own. The mate bond had deepened over the months, becoming less overwhelming and more essential, like breathing. The Northern Alphas arrived today for the treaty negotiations. Nervous? His golden eyes searched hers. "Terrified," she admitted. 6 months ago, I was a servant. Now I'm expected to negotiate territorial agreements with wolves who've been playing political games since before I was born. 6 months ago, you were a woman discovering her power," Kieran corrected gently. "Now you're a queen who's revolutionized how we approach Silverblood magic, who's established healing centers in 3 territories, and who's somehow convinced the most stubborn alphas in the kingdom that cooperation is more profitable than conflict." His lips curved. "You're going to be magnificent." The confidence in his voice steadied her. The mate bond worked both ways. She felt his absolute faith in her abilities, his pride in her accomplishments, his love that had grown from desperate attraction into something deeper and more enduring. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Your Majesties, Professor Thorne requests an audience." The ancient wolf entered with his characteristic energy, carrying a leather-bound tome that looked older than the palace itself. "Good morning, my dear children. I bring gifts." He set the book on the table with a reverent thud. The complete history of Silverblood queens, dating back to the founding of the 7 territories. "I thought you might find it illuminating." Elara opened the book carefully, her fingers tracing text written in the old tongue she'd learned to read fluently. These women, they weren't just mates. They were advisors, warriors, healers, partners in every sense. Precisely. Thorne's pale eyes gleamed. The tradition of Silverblood queens as mere ornamental mates is relatively recent. A corruption introduced about 2 centuries ago by alphas who feared sharing power. You, my dear, are returning to the old ways, and terrifying quite a few traditionalists in the process. "Good," Kieran said flatly. "Let them be terrified. Elara has earned her place 100 times over." A commotion in the corridor drew their attention. Marcus appeared, his expression carefully neutral in the way that meant trouble. "Your Majesties, we have visitors. Lady Celeste Ravenclaw and her father, Alpha Ravenclaw, are demanding an audience." Elara's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen Celeste since the night of the attack, when the former candidate had been sent home in disgrace. The Ravenclaw pack had been furious at their daughter's rejection, and rumors suggested they'd been quietly building alliances against the crown. "Show them to the formal receiving room," Kieran said. "We'll meet them there." The receiving room was designed to intimidate, all soaring ceilings, and the throne positioned to catch the light in ways that made whoever sat upon it appear almost divine. Kieran took his seat with practiced ease, and Elara settled beside him in the Queen's throne that had been crafted specifically for her, its silver inlays matching the crown that now rested on her auburn hair. Celeste entered first, her silver eyes cold as winter frost. She'd lost weight, Elara noticed, and there was a brittleness to her beauty that hadn't been there before. Alpha Ravenclaw followed, a massive wolf with Celeste's coloring and an expression of barely contained rage. "Your Majesties." Celeste's curtsy was perfunctory, bordering on insulting. "Thank you for granting us this audience." "State your business," Kieran said, his voice devoid of warmth. Alpha Ravenclaw stepped forward. "My daughter was humiliated by your unconventional choice of queen. The Ravenclaw name has suffered. Our alliances have weakened. We demand compensation." "Compensation?" Elara kept her voice level, despite the anger simmering in her chest. "For what exactly? Your daughter wasn't chosen. That's not humiliation, that's simply not being selected. She wasn't given a fair chance." Celeste's composure cracked. You manipulated everything from the beginning. You played the victim, made yourself seem weak and pathetic, all while seducing the king behind everyone's backs. I was a servant, Elara said quietly, publicly humiliated, stripped of my status, relegated to cataloguing books in a library. If that was seduction, I'm remarkably bad at it. You knew he wanted you. You used that knowledge to— Enough! Kieran's voice cracked like a whip. You will not speak to your queen with such disrespect. Elara earned her position through power, courage, and sacrifice. She fought beside me when rebels attacked. She saved my life. What have you done except demonstrate your own inadequacy? Celeste's face flushed crimson. I am pure Silverblood. My lineage is impeccable. I should have been chosen. Lineage means nothing without character, Thorn interjected from his position near the wall. A lesson you've consistently failed to learn, Lady Celeste. This is outrageous, Alpha Ravenclaw snarled. We will not be dismissed like— You will be dismissed however I choose to dismiss you, Kieran said coldly. However, I'm not without mercy. The Ravenclaw pack has served the crown for generations. I'm willing to overlook this lapse in judgment, but there will be conditions. He gestured to Marcus, who stepped forward with a scroll. The Ravenclaw territory will open 3 healing centers using Silverblood magic techniques developed by Queen Elara. You'll provide resources and protection for these centers, and in return, your people will receive the benefits of advanced healing, and your pack's reputation will be restored through association with the Queen's charitable works. It was brilliant politics, turning a potential enemy into an ally by giving them a stake in Elara's success. Alpha Ravenclaw's expression shifted from rage to calculation as he considered the offer. And my daughter, he asked. Will apologize to the Queen, Kieran said flatly. Sincerely, or the offer is rescinded. Silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Celeste's silver eyes blazed with hatred, but her father's hand on her shoulder was firm. Finally, she stepped forward and dropped into a proper curtsy. Your Majesty, she said, each word clearly costing her. I apologize for my disrespectful behavior. I spoke from wounded pride rather than wisdom. It wasn't sincere. Elara could smell the lie beneath the pretty words, but it was enough. Apology accepted, Lady Celeste. I hope in time you'll find happiness in your own path rather than coveting mine. The Ravenclaws departed with stiff formality, and the moment the doors closed, Elara sagged in her throne. That was exhausting. You handled it perfectly, Kieran said, pride evident in his voice and through the mate bond. Firm but gracious. Every Alpha watching will have noted your composure. Watching? Elara's eyes widened as she noticed the subtle shimmer in the air near the windows. Scrying magic, allowing distant observers to witness the audience. How many? All of them, Marcus said with a slight smile. The Northern Alphas wanted to assess the new queen before the negotiations. I'd say you passed their test admirably. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of activity. The Northern Alphas arrived with their entourages, and Elara found herself navigating complex political discussions with a confidence she'd never imagined possessing. The months of study with Thorn, of learning pack histories and territorial disputes, of understanding the intricate web of alliances and grudges that defined their world, all of it came together, but it was more than knowledge. It was the mate bond with Kieran, allowing them to communicate silently, to present a united front, to balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. When she faltered, she felt his steady confidence. When he grew too aggressive, she felt her tempering influence flow through their connection. By evening, they'd negotiated a treaty that expanded trade routes, established shared defense protocols, and created a framework for resolving disputes without bloodshed. The Northern Alphas departed satisfied, and Elara finally allowed herself to breathe. I can't believe we actually did it, she said, as she and Kieran walked through the gardens that night, her silver flowers glowing softly in the moonlight. I can. He pulled her close, and she felt his love and admiration through the bond. You're exactly what this kingdom needed, what I needed. I was so lost 6 months ago, Elara admitted. I thought I knew who I was, the perfect daughter, the obedient mate-to-be, the decorative addition to someone else's life. Losing all of that felt like dying. But you didn't die. You transformed. Kieran tilted her chin up, his golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. You became who you were always meant to be. We both did, she smiled. You were so alone before, carrying everything yourself. Now you have a partner, an equal. The best decision I ever made was recognizing you for what you were, even when you couldn't see it yourself. He kissed her softly. Though I'll admit, the execution could have been better. The public humiliation still haunts me. It needed to happen, Elara said, surprising herself with the realization. I needed to be broken down to nothing so I could rebuild myself into something real. If you'd simply chosen me that first night, I would have been another Celeste defined by your choice rather than my own strength. They walked in comfortable silence, and Elara thought about the woman she'd been. Frightened, uncertain, shaped entirely by others' expectations. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who discovered her own power, her own voice, her own worth. News reached them the next morning that Cassius Blackthorne had taken a mate, a political alliance with the Eastern Territories that would benefit his pack immensely. Elara felt nothing but relief. That life, that gilded cage, would have destroyed her slowly. Any regrets? Kieran asked, watching her face carefully. Not a single one. And it was true. Though I do wonder sometimes about the girl I was, who thought love was a weakness and duty was everything. She's still part of you, just evolved. He smiled. Like a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, though that's a terrible metaphor for a wolf. Elara laughed, the sound free and genuine. Awful. You're lucky you're pretty. And you're lucky you're brilliant. He grew serious. I have something for you. He led her to a section of the palace she'd never seen, a tower room with windows on all sides and shelves lining every wall. Your own library, for your research, your healing work, your studies, a place that's entirely yours. Tears pricked her eyes. He understood her so completely, knew that she needed space to grow, to learn, to be herself beyond even their bond. It's perfect. You're perfect. He kissed her forehead. My queen, my mate, my Elara. That evening they hosted a feast for the palace staff and guards, the people who'd witnessed her journey from disgraced candidate to crowned queen. Margot wept openly when Elara embraced her. Marcus raised a toast to the most stubborn, brilliant and terrifying queen the Seven Territories have ever known. And when Elara stood to speak, looking out at faces that had once watched her humiliation and now showed respect and genuine affection, she felt the weight of how far she'd traveled. 6 months ago, I stood in the grand ceremonial hall and was declared useless, she began. I believed it. I'd spent my entire life being told I wasn't enough, and that moment seemed to confirm every fear I'd ever had about myself. She paused, finding Kieran's eyes across the room. But I was wrong. I wasn't useless, I was unfinished, I wasn't weak, I was untested. And I wasn't alone even when I felt most isolated, because there were people who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself. Her gaze found Thorn, who nodded with satisfaction. Thank you for teaching me that power without wisdom is just noise. Thank you for asking me every day what I wanted, until I finally found an answer. She looked at Marcus. Thank you for protecting me, even when I didn't know I needed protection. And finally, Kieran, thank you for loving me enough to hurt me, for knowing that sometimes the greatest gift is letting someone fall so they can learn to fly. The feast continued late into the night, filled with laughter and music and the kind of joy that comes from genuine community. And when Elara finally retired to the royal chambers, Kieran at her side, she stood once more on the balcony and looked out at the kingdom that was now hers to help lead. What are you thinking? Kieran asked, wrapping his arms around her. That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She leaned into his embrace. That I've finally bloomed where I was planted. And what a magnificent bloom it is. He kissed her neck. What do you want, Elara Silverpaw? The question that had once paralyzed her now made her smile. Everything. I want to heal, to lead, to learn, to love. I want to be the queen this kingdom deserves. I want to build something beautiful with you. She turned in his arms. I want it all. Then it's yours. His golden eyes blazed with love and promise. All of it. Always. And as the moon rose full and bright over the Moonstone Palace, Elara knew with absolute certainty that her story, the real story, the one she'd written herself, was only beginning. Thank you for joining Elara on her journey from gilded cage to true freedom, from powerless pawn to powerful queen. If you enjoyed this tale of transformation, betrayal, and a love that defied expectations, please subscribe for more paranormal romance stories. Leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. We love hearing from our global audience. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to remember that sometimes we must be broken down to be rebuilt into something magnificent. Until next time, may you all flourish wherever you're planted.